first times you take off, you gotta push the I believe button.
Hello and welcome to Aerospace Horizons. My name is Evan, and today we are going to be reviewing The Blue Angels, a new documentary that's currently out in IMAX theaters for 1 week only, and it'll be coming to Amazon Prime Video on May 23rd. I am a huge Blue Angel fan. Growing up in the 90s, I actually watched the documentary Around the World at the Speed of Sound more times than I'm willing to admit. And the director of that movie, Rob Stone, is an executive producer on this new movie, along with Greg Wooldridge, Boss Wooldridge, who was the commanding officer during that documentary. And he's an executive producer on this new movie as well. And I had the privilege to talk to him recently about the making of the movie. I could have talked to him for hours. It was just a blast. So if you're interested in Blue Angels at all, I recommend checking it out either here or down below. I'm going to talk about details of this movie that I guess you could consider spoilers. I mean, it's not a narrative movie, right? So, there's not a ton to spoil, but there are moments in the movie that I hadn't heard about before or seen before. So if you are someone who's very sensitive to that sort of thing, maybe just save this video, come back to it once you're done watching the movie. So I wanted to start by talking about the best aspect of the movie, which is the technical quality, like the way it's filmed, the cinematography, the sound design, everything about it is immaculate. I mean, seeing this thing in IMAX was just like, wow. They used the same crew that shot a lot of the aerial sequences in Top Gun Maverick to do this, and it really shows. I mean, if you're a Blue Angel fan, you haven't seen stuff like this before, and even what's in the trailers is just kind of a taste of what you're going to get in this movie. It's just wall to wall. All the flying stuff is just insane looking. They had several different ways that they filmed it. Basically, they had a rig on a spare jet that would fly sort of around the formations, and that jet had a rig on it that had an IMAX quality camera on it, and that was the same rig again that was used in Top Gun Maverick, and they were able to capture all that stuff, the high speed stuff, with another jet. They also had a little GoPro size camera. I forget the exact model, but it was a higher quality than GoPro that they could stick inside the cockpit of all the jets and capture everybody's grunting and groaning with the G-forces and all the moments that you don't get to see. And they also used a helicopter to film, which had a special turret on it that was converted into a film camera rig, an IMAX camera rig that could capture all this stuff. But what was cool about this movie is that they got special permission to get that helicopter inside the box of the demonstration, which is not something that's happened before. So, there's shots of these jets coming very close to the camera. I don't know how they managed to do that. Even talking to Boss Wooldridge about it, like, they briefed a lot to make sure that that nothing happened, and thankfully nothing did. But I'm just watching it and wow. Some of my favorite shots, there's an epic shot of Fat Albert doing the vertical takeoff that it does, and you're kind of peering down on it from, way high up, and Fat Albert goes from being a top-down view to like coming straight at you and then pitches down and seemingly just misses the camera. It's a beautiful, majestic shot. There was a slow motion shot of the fleur-de-lis maneuver where all 6 jets sort of split apart, and seeing that in slow motion, 1,000 frames a second, jets spinning, the smoke trails behind them. It's just, I think it was like backlit by the sun too, like just ludicrously good looking stuff. And there was also a section where they finally get to what they call the Yankee set, which is the closest that they can bring the formation in and still, not hit essentially. And the footage from that is just wild. They have cameras on the jets that captured it. And seeing it from the ground is one thing, but seeing it from the jets, those, they say it's 12 inches, but it looks like less than that. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was some swapped paint on some of those wingtips there, because they're close and you see it. It's magnificent. In terms of like direction and production, Paul Crowder was the director of this movie, and I think he did a pretty great job of making this film, unique enough, right? Like it's kind of hard to do a movie about the Blue Angels because it's been done several times now, and they really don't change how they do things that much. So to find a new angle on it is pretty hard, and I think he did a pretty good job of carving out this movie's niche, right, and what its style was and how it fit into the pantheon of Blue Angel movies. It's definitely the most like slick and cinematic, right? Given all I just talked about the technical, how they filmed it and all that. They did a really good job of identifying through lines, of the different characters that they're going to follow and the moments that they're going to pick and like the moments that they talk about that they're excited about. And then they actually film those moments later on. So you get that sort of call and response and, callbacks that happen in the movie. Like it's really good. There's a lot of really good stuff in there. The editing, this was mostly good, but it was a little mixed for me. Overall, I thought like the pacing was good and the way, and I never felt like I was sitting there like checking my watch, right? Like it felt like things were moving along at a good clip and the necessary information was getting out there, but it never felt like a slog to get through. The issue I had with the editing was mostly in the way that the aerial sequences actually were cut. I felt like maybe it's just me, but I could sit there and watch the unedited shots just for hours, and the cutting was pretty quick at times, like almost like commercial style, very, very fast cuts. And maybe that'll play better when it's on Amazon, but in IMAX, I kind of just wanted to soak it in, right? And there are a couple of moments where the movie does do that, like that fleur-de-lis shot that I mentioned, super slow-mo, just lets you sit on it. I wanted more of that, and there was just a little bit, there just wasn't enough of it for me. It didn't ruin the experience, it just was something I noticed on a giant 70-foot screen. In terms of the storyline, as I said, like the Blue Angels are kind of very repetitive, right? That's their whole thing. That's how they maintain a safe demonstration. That's how they've endured as long as they have, is they do things the same way. They do it every single day the same way, and that's how they stay safe. It's not very, it doesn't lend itself very well to narrative, but I thought they managed to do a pretty good job with what they had in pulling that stuff out of the pilots and other various characters in the movie. Boss Kesselring, I guess, was probably the most prominent. He's the leader, and he sort of had this veteran quality of, it's his last tour and he's staring down the barrel of retirement. And I know he went on to do other things in the Navy, obviously, but in terms of his time on the Blues, it was like sort of his last ride. And he sort of personified that for all the guys who's it was their last year. And that's something that the Blue Angels talk about a lot. Like this, the surreal quality of you have this rush, and then all of a sudden it's just over. Right, you're done, and they changed the names on the parking spots during the last show. So he sort of brought the gravitas of that, I thought, very well. There was also a lot of focus on Chris Kapachansky and Scott Goosen's Cheese and Jimani. I don't even know how to say his call sign, and I still don't know what it means. But there was a lot of focus on them as newbies, which makes sense. It was cool to see. It was good to see them like grow throughout the course of the movie. I got the sense that a lot of the interviews with them were shot towards the end of the season and they were like looking back on their experience. And I kind of wish that we had gotten more in the moment interviews earlier on. I understand why that would have been hard because they're already learning an impossibly difficult thing, and you wouldn't want to disturb them, clearly, but this is something that was handled really well in the documentary in 2004, A Year in the Life. It was a docu-series, I guess. There was a lot of talk of pilots dealing with that and then the new aspect of coming onto the team in the first year. And I feel like that was just slightly missing here. Like I wanted to see just a little bit more of it, but those two guys are great. They have great personalities, so it was good to ride along with them. And it was really cool to see Chomps and the number 4 slot sort of come into his own as the safety officer for the team. And It's always good to have a Marine on the team and have him have such a prominent role. It was really cool to see his growth. And in terms of the solos, I thought the solos kind of got a little bit of short shrift in this movie. I wanted to see more from them. Like especially those two guys in particular. They were both on the team during the COVID year, where they basically froze the team because they had to cancel their season effectively for the COVID in 2020, the COVID year. And then in 2021, they transitioned to the Super Hornet. So what they did was they froze the 2020 team and carried everybody over to 2021. So those two guys were part of that. And the solos already do a 3-year tour versus the Diamond pilots who only do a 2-year tour. So, by the end of it, they were some of the most experienced Blue Angel pilots ever in terms of, tenure and amount of time on the team. So it was kind of weird that they weren't really, they were in it, but they weren't the focus. The focus was very much on the Diamond. And as someone who loves the solos, I was a little disappointed in that. And I also wanted to see a little bit more from the enlisted folks on the team. It seemed like there was maybe some stuff that got cut out, some stuff that seemed a little like out of left field. Like there was a whole bit about one of the crew chiefs at the end sort of doing a whole song for everybody, like during the right before the homecoming show, that felt like it was not set up beforehand. And I wanted to see, what's going on there, right? Like those guys are so cool. And, we got to start the movie and end the movie with them doing the Blue Angel Creed or whatever it's called. I felt like they got kind of lost in the mix throughout the movie because the focus was so much on the pilots, which is always the case, right? But you have a documentary, you have a chance to pump those guys up a little bit, and guys and gals up a little bit. So yeah, a little bit of a missed opportunity there. Of course, it was great to see all the new pilots coming on. You had the new boss to replace Boss Kesselring, Boss Armitage. You had Thomas Zimmerman and Amanda Lee, of course, the first female jet demo pilot. There's a really great sequence where they go to the centrifuge to get certified, essentially, and being able to do the show without a G-suit. And Armitage, the new boss, goes into G-lock. He passes out, which is, I was not expecting that. I hadn't heard about that. That's got to be a wake-up call for him to be like, wow. Franz, Thomas Zimmerman, call sign Franz. He's a great-looking guy normally, but I got to say, the shots of him under G-load, he looked demonic. He looked absolutely terrifying. If I ran into him looking like that in any capacity, I would run the other way. He was so scary. It seems like a great guy. He's on the team now. He's number 6. But holy moly. Jeez. Wow. And of course, we got to see Amanda Lee, the first female jet demo pilot on the Blue Angels. And her introduction to the team is kind of a bummer. It was great that they were able to capture her coming onto the team and, being a newbie and all that stuff. But it was kind of a bummer that they didn't film it a year later when it was her season, and they would be able to get her in the demo for it. That would have been really cool to see, but it is what it is. She actually had some of the funniest moments, I thought, in the movie. She goes into G-lock as well, just like Boss Armitage did. And her expression when she comes out of G-lock of just, where am I, was so funny. And then there was also this moment of her and Mo, the maintenance officer, where she's, shadowing the team and going to shows and watching from the ground. And she's standing there and she's sort of standing in the way of everybody. And he's like, can you just come back up a little? And she's like, oh, okay. It backs up. It's like, am I good here? And he's like, no, you need to move again. It's like, oh, okay. It's very awkward, very funny. The documentary did not at all interrogate why it took so long to have a female pilot on the Blue Angels. I was talking to Boss Wooldridge about this on the interview that I did with him. And he was saying that he was asked this constantly as far back as in the 90s when he was on the team, and his response was like, "It's got to be soon." it's bound to happen soon. And that was 30 years ago, right? And it only just happened now. So it's weird that it took so long, and I feel like the movie didn't even interrogate it at all. And that sort of gets at my biggest criticism of the movie. And to call it a criticism is kind of unfair, because it's something that's inherent to any documentary about the Blue Angels, which is that if you are a documentary crew and you are trying to get access to the team, you have to go through the Navy. And if you go through the Navy is going to have restrictions on what you can say and do and show in your movie. It's just that simple, and it makes sense. I don't begrudge anybody this, like, right? Like, the Blue Angels are a recruitment tool. That is their mission. Their mission is to sign people up for the Navy. So to do a movie about them, you are inherently sort of under that umbrella, right? And you know, it kind of feels like that sometimes. It feels like an advertisement at points. And as someone who wants to see a little bit more beyond just what's on the surface, that's a little frustrating that we'll never be able to get that opportunity just because of the reality of, you know, how these movies are made. I get it. It's a hard problem to solve. I didn't expect this movie to have that. Actually, the Rob Stone movie in the 90s, you know, it had this issue too. All the Blue Angel movies really have this. The Rob Stone movie kind of got around it a little bit by just being a little goofy. It's just sillier than this movie. This movie's pretty serious. You know, it has moments of levity in it, which are you know, funny, but not many. It's mostly pretty like serious. And the Rob Stone movie just was it just took itself a little less seriously. And because it took itself a little less seriously, it kind of just like got around some of those issues of, you know, it feeling like an ad. So to wrap this all up, if you're a fan of the Blue Angels, go see this movie. Like, plain and simple. You probably already have, but if you haven't, go see the movie. Go in IMAX before it leaves theaters, because it's not going to be the same on streaming. It's a audio-visual feast for your senses and deserves to be seen on the biggest screen you can find. The best aspect of the movie is how it looks and how it sounds. It's immaculate. It's the best the Blues have ever looked and probably will ever look. I don't really know how you could improve on this, honestly. Yeah, it looks incredible. The social side of it, you know, with the storylines with the pilots, left a little bit more to be desired, but it was not enough to ruin the experience for me. It was a thrill ride. It was fun. It's great. It's a great representation of what the Blues do and how they do it. So check it out. And yeah, this is a bit of a newer type of video for this channel, a little more off the cuff and less rehearsed and prepared. So I'm trying out some stuff. I'd like to know, you know, what you think, and you can let me know in the comments down below, and be sure to like and subscribe for future videos. And I'll leave you with the Greg Wooldridge interview is going to be like here, and then some other video will be here. How about that? So you can watch one of those. And until next time,